Tonight we're going to go on a ghost walk, going with a group of people. We're going to visit some of the scary sites in Edinburgh, but before that we're going for a drink in the pub. But this is no ordinary pub. The BANSHEE in Edinburgh is very haunted. Apparently some builders went down in the basement doing some renovation. In the corner of the room was a lady, and when she saw people coming down she started screaming. So apparently when the builders went home, one of them had a relative that died. So a banshee is supposed to be somebody that foretells death, and there has been some strange incidents in this pub. So we're going to have a pint tonight and see what it's like. And then we're going to head off on this ghost trip. Well, we've just finished our pint in the BANSHEE. Thankfully we didn't run into Rosie, the prostitute ghost. Yes, there's several ghosts in this pub. There's at least 3 or 4 of them that you'll find in here. People come out with all different weird things that have happened to them in here. So if you want to get drunk and have an encounter with Rosie the prostitute ghost, then the BANSHEE pub is where you need to be. Well, we're going to head off now for our ghost tour and see if we can bump into any strange things. But I dare say in Edinburgh anything's possible. Folks, we're just waiting for our group to get ready and then we'll be off on our tour. I don't actually know where we're going. My son arranged this on the last minute, so I'm not sure if I've done this particular trip before. It will be interesting nonetheless. As you can see behind me, there's many groups, many ghost tours in Edinburgh. Edinburgh is famous for these ghost tours. Edinburgh has got a very rich historic history. and consequently there's loads of ghosts, loads of tourists.
Even more often. On the count of three, freedom.
A little bit closer, everyone. Well, I'm not that scary, am I? That's good.
That's good.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Edinburgh. Of course, welcome to MERCAT Tours. Now, I'll be your tour guide tonight. I don't think I introduced myself. My name, as you can see written right here, is Amandine. And it is the scariest thing you'll hear all night. It's a French name. So like a lot of things the French do, it's rather hard to pronounce. So if you want, you can also just call me Andy. Whether you call me Amandine or Andy is entirely dependent on which name you can pronounce. I do highly recommend that you remember one of these two names. As you see, we're beginning out here. Out here, as you can tell, it's still fairly light. We still have witnesses and places to run to. After this, we're going down into the vaults. And the vaults are dark, dangerous. Some claim to have heard things in them. Others to have seen things. And some worryingly claim to have felt things. So if it's the case for any of you tonight, all you have to do is shout, Andy! And I will be gone in a flash. You see, you are all the bait tonight. You're the early warning system if anything goes wrong. And trust me, it might. Because as I'm sure you're all aware, we're very close to Halloween, All Hallows Eve as it's known. The point at which the veil between the worlds comes down and the spirits find it easier to walk around, interact with us. Now some are harmless, but others are not the kind that you'd particularly like to make friends with. And unfortunately, those are some of the ones that we have in the vaults. But before we get to visiting them, we're going to begin out here for a while, just to give you some time to panic and run. You see, we're currently standing in the city chambers of Edinburgh. Now, I just have to be completely honest with you, this is not a place of great historical location. But from this point, you can see the MERCAT across the point at which you met us, the rather odd-looking monument, the octagonal shape where, well, you got your tickets. And you see that the MERCAT Cross was often, well, for a long time, the centre point of Edinburgh. MERCAT translates to market, not MERCAT. And so that was the marketplace of Edinburgh, a place of trade and culture. It was also a place for other things. It was a place for daily entertainment. Now this was at a time when we didn't have the entertainment we have nowadays. We didn't have Dancing with the Stars, we didn't have Come Dine With Me. We had to make our own fun. And well, our own fun was much more along the lines of Game of Thrones. We got Thrones fans in tonight. Yeah. Yes, well, two by the sounds of it. The two of you will enjoy it. We'll see about the rest of you. Our entertainment was far more along those lines, by which I mean the daily entertainment that took place at the MERCAT Cross was torture and executions. That was the fun back in the day.
Yes.
Have I got everyone? Yes, lovely. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think we'll agree this is a bit more atmospheric, isn't it? We're standing in a close, this rather narrow alley. The reason these alleys were called closes is very simply because back when they were built, They were built with a gate at the entrance, so were closed off to anyone who didn't have the key and lived within the close. But the problem is that a gate's not really going to stop anyone who desperately wants to get in. And the closes were also known as the gruesome sites of murders. Now, I would love to tell you that such a murder never took place on this close, but unfortunately, I can't do that with any confidence, because there is one murder here in Edinburgh that's particularly special in that no one knows where it took place. All we know is that the flat in which it took place has a grandfather clock in it. That is all. Now, you see, not long ago, a mother and child, young girl, had recently moved into a flat here in Edinburgh. If you've been in Edinburgh for more than 5 minutes, you've probably realised it's quite an old city. The buildings are old, and like all old buildings, they make noises at night. And as the young girl lay in bed every night, she'd hear the creak of the floorboards, the pitter-patter of the mice, the whistle of the wind, all the normal sounds an old house makes. The mother, on the other hand, had a very different experience. Every night when she went to bed, she'd feel a rush of cold air past her cheek. She'd hear her door creak open, and then hear footsteps going up, up, up the stairs to the flat above. Every single night. Until one night, she decided to ask the landlord who lived above her that was making so much noise, and was told that the flat above was abandoned. No one had lived there for years. Now, she thought nothing of it, and one night went to the pub, left her young daughter at home alone. And the daughter, being quite a small child, crept into her mother's bed, seeking out her warmth. And there, she too felt the rush of cold air, heard the door creak open, and the footsteps going up, up, up the stairs. She didn't stay in bed. No, she followed the footsteps. She too went up, up, up the stairs to the flat above, and then, finding the door of the flat open, pushed it to and peered in. And in the flat, she saw one thing. She saw a grandfather clock. Well, two things really, the grandfather clock and the figure hunched over it. A figure of a man, trembling with a bundle in his hands, clutching it tight to his chest. And as he turned to look at her, she ran back down the stairs and went to bed. And she told her mother about this, but the mother dismissed it as nothing more than a child's nightmare. Until she realised that for the last 6 days, she hadn't heard the creak of the door, felt the rush of cold air, or the footsteps going up the stairs. Well, not for 6 days. The very following night, exactly a week later, again they came, the rush of cold air, the creak of the door. But this time no footsteps, no one going upstairs. Instead, she felt a presence in her room, someone standing there. She opened her eyes to find a man in her doorway, swaying, a bottle of gin in his hand. As he opened bloodshot eyes to look at her, moved towards her, he disappeared. Now, this was too much for the mother, and she moved out, as anyone should at that point. She made inquiries as to what had gone on in the flat previously to find out, and this is what she found. That, in the flat that she once lived in, there had lived a sailor, an old man, a retired man, who had taken, in his boredom, to drinking. And in the flat above his, well, there'd been a young couple with an infant child. Every single night, the child would scream and scream and scream until the mother would come and pick it up, rock it to sleep, and sing to it. Now, the sailor would put up for the screams until they subsided and then go back to his drinking. But one night the screams continued. The mother didn't come to quieten the child, there was no singing, and the sailor, not knowing what to do, put his drink down, rushed out the door, up, up, up the stairs, found the door of the flat open, crept in, and found the child in the crib, the parents nowhere to be found. They picked it up and tried to sing it to sleep, rocking it side to side. You see, he was too rough, too tough for the child, and it screamed all the more, and not knowing what to do with it, he simply held it very close to his chest, but held it so very tight that he crushed its little skull in his hands. And as the blood began oozing down his arm, not knowing what to do with the body of the child, he very simply put it in the closest place he could find, the grandfather clock, and then went back to bed. Every night after that, screams would haunt him until one night, not being able to take it anymore, he handed himself over to the authorities, who put him not into jail, but into an asylum, into Bedlam. And there he stayed for a year, the screams haunting him every single night, until after a year. You see, a year in a cell by themselves, while men's nails get long and hard and jagged, very simply took his 2 thumbnails and dug them deep into the veins of his legs, sliced them open, and bled out on the floor of the asylum. And what passed for his soul returned to the house in which he once lived. And since, it's said that every night he still hears the screaming child, and every night goes up, up, up the stairs to sing it back to sleep. But like I said, we don't know where this took place. The grandfather clock, for all we know, might have moved. Could be a B&B, could be your friend's house, could really be anywhere. So if tonight, as you lie in bed, you feel a rush of cold air, hear your door creak open, and the footsteps going up, up, up the stairs, well, you'll know exactly who it is. But on that note, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to stop speculating about ghosts, and time to go visit some very real ones. It's time for the vaults. Out that way. Deep. A little bit closer, everyone. Good. Well, ladies and gentlemen, before we head into the vaults, just a few things. Now, for one, the street running behind us is the South Bridge. Now, I'll mention it later. It's the street that runs from the Tronkirk, the church right here, to the building with the dome over there, the old medical school. And it's the one with all the cars and the buses on it that you'll just see. Now, as I said, I'll talk about it later, but just so that you can all see where it is and what it looks like, that's it right there. Now, before we go into the vaults, just a few health and safety warnings. So for your health and safety, no eating, no drinking, no smoking in the vaults. Ghosts can't do those things anymore. They get very jealous if we do them, and we try not to anger them. Once we go in, your tickets might be checked, so please have them at the ready. There is then quite a steep and uneven set of stairs. For the clumsy ones amongst you, there is a handrail. I do highly recommend that you use it. As you see, I'm at the front, and the domino effect means that I will be knocked down yet once again. And as you can tell, being knocked down the stairs is not a look that suits me. In the vault, it is very dark in there, and the floor is very uneven, so please watch where you put your feet, and for taller people, watch your heads. There's a couple low ceilings.
Tickets, please. Thank you. Thank you. Got your tickets. Thank you. Thank you. Tickets, please.
Don't shit your pants now. Watch too many horror movies to do this.
Closer, everyone. Good. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as I'm sure you realise, we are now standing in the vaults. For those of you wondering exactly where we are, we're standing directly below the South Bridge, the street that I pointed out earlier. And so, if you listen very carefully, you'll hear the club next door, but other than that, you won't hear a thing. You won't hear the noise of cars, of traffic, of people that are all directly above us. Which does, of course, mean that they can't hear us. South Bridge, you see, was constructed in 1788, and when it was built with 19 visible arches. Of the 19, one remains visible today, the Cowgate Arch at the bottom of this street. The reason we can't see the other arches of the bridge is because we bricked them up and then divided them into these vaults. Now, this particular room is very special. This room is 2 vaults, one on top of the other. At some point, the ceiling of this bottom one caved in, but we can still see the line of where it ran, as well as a door up there, and what's left of a door up there. When these rooms, these vaults were first opened, they were used mainly by merchants, as storerooms, workshops. So I think that we can agree that this isn't the nicest of places to work in. And the merchants certainly thought so, because they moved out in the 1820s. But you see, when they left behind these lovely, empty vaults. And someone else moved in. Now, first it was the poor, those looking for shelter, for a roof over their head. Then came the thieves, the murderers, the body snatchers, the slum, landlords, the illegal gambling dens and drinking dens, the women of the night. Criminals from every walk of life came down into the vaults, which of course made for a lot of activity, but above all, a lot of tragedy. Perhaps why the vaults are so haunted today. Now eventually, in the 1860s, the government found out about all this. So they filled the vaults with rubble to drive everyone out. And they lay abandoned for over 100 years, only to be rediscovered in the 1980s. And we have been using them since '96. Now, at first, we thought the vaults were nothing more than an atmospheric place to tell a few ghost stories, perhaps some local legends. But the longer we spent in here, the more we realized that the stories we were telling may have a little more truth to them than we would have wanted. We're currently standing in the 3rd most active room of the vaults, and we have no fewer than 4 spirits in here. Now some, not to worry, are entirely harmless, what we call residual spirits, echoes from the past, reliving their final moments over and over, having no interaction with us whatsoever. And such a spirit is said to reside on what used to be the top floor, in that corner over there, sometimes seen crouching in his corner, at other times pacing across the ceiling, shivering with cold and rubbing his arms and chest to get warm. Perhaps one of the poor who came down here looking for shelter. And whenever he is seen, he's described in great detail. And when I say great detail, I mean that gentleman. Rest of the tour. That gentleman is described in very precise detail. Because you see, ladies, that gentleman has always been described as completely naked. That is a kind of horror we don't do on this tour. I'd advise you not to look upwards for too long. Now, we have another spirit in the top corner up there. And this one's not a someone. This one is a something, what we call an elemental. It doesn't have a shape or body the way most spirits do. It's more like an energy, perhaps even a bird. People see they feel feathers on their face in this room. They sense a flutter behind them, or that they see something swooping around the room, brushing people's heads as it goes. But to be honest, it doesn't come out very often, so no cause for alarm there. However, we have more interactive spirits, of course. For one, we have a gentleman in that doorway. Now, he's very well dressed, top hat, nice coat, moustache, and those who see him tell us that he's Abraham Lincoln. Few giggles there. You might know that Abraham Lincoln never came to Edinburgh, so that is clearly not the dead American president. Who is he then? We've managed to find out. His name is Finian Mackenzie, and he is an Irish aristocrat. That then begs the question, why is he here? Not one of the criminals, and not one of the poor. Is he here waiting for someone, here for the drinking or the gambling? We don't know. And well, to make matters worse, we don't quite know how Finian feels about the tour groups. Now, you'll find this out very quickly as we move through the vaults. Our residents make their feelings towards us very clear, good or bad. But Finian just seems curious, leaning against the doorway, smiling, waving at the pretty girls that he likes. Eventually, though, his curiosity is going to wear off, and what it will give way to, no one knows. So if tonight is the night that Finian decides how he feels about the tour groups, well, ladies, if you see him, perhaps a smile and a wave will be enough to satisfy him. Gentlemen, of course, you can try this too if you like. Like I said, Finian's not the one you need to worry about, because we have someone else in this room. Someone in the other doorway. And I'm afraid to say it's not Pete. It's someone we call the Watcher. Because you see, he doesn't just watch us in this room. He watches us in every room, following the tour groups as they move through the vaults. But since he's going to follow us, I will tell you more about him in the next room. This way. Have we got Pete yet? Pete, you with us?
Yeah, here I am.
Yes, good. Well, ladies and gentlemen, quick word about this room. This is a room we call the Tavern Room, because very simply we think it was once an underground tavern. And the reason we think this, when we dug the room out, we found oyster shells. Oysters once being a cheap and popular snack served in taverns. But you see, that's what we tell the daytime tours. There is another explanation for the oyster shells, one that might be a bit more sinister. You see, they were believed to have a certain property, believed to keep out those touched by the devil, the witches, the warlocks, or those who, like our William, had made a deal with the devil. And so the oysters were often embedded into the walls, above the doorways, or crushed into the cement used to build with. So whilst my colleagues like to say this was nothing more than a friendly drinking den, I like to leave it up to you to decide if there was perhaps something a bit more sinister at work here. And speaking of, I mentioned the Watcher in the previous room, Watcher who's followed us into here. You see, he is by far our most cited spirit, but is by far the most malevolent one. A very angry, powerful spirit, desperate for one thing alone, and that is for the tour groups to leave. Now to that end, he's tried many things, from appearing to people, to whispering to them, to playing absolutely horrific music, to sometimes pushing them out of the vaults. As it just so happens, his favourite corridor is the one behind me, the place that he appears in more often. So you all get to play bait to my next story, because my next story takes place in the corridor. This way. What was that? Right. Have I got everyone? Peach with us? Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're standing somewhere very special because it might look like we're standing in a tunnel. We are actually standing on a street. We're standing on Nidri Street that once ran parallel to Blair Street. When we built the bridge, you see, we built over Nidri Street and it's become a part of the vaults. I mentioned these vaults were rediscovered in the 1980s. They were discovered by a man called Roamin, a rugby player who had just bought the pub at the top of the road. He wanted to find out what lay below the pub, perhaps to use it as space. And he'd heard stories about the vaults. And having no other way to find out if the stories he'd heard were true or not, he very simply got a shovel and began to dig. And over the next 10 years, Roamin and his friends dug out the entirety of the Blair Street vaults. And all was fine. That is until they got to these vaults. You see, as they got to these vaults, they began to hear a noise quite different to the one we're hearing. It was a low, moaning, groaning noise. And they thought it was pipes, ignored it, and on they went. But the noise got louder and louder, the deeper they went into the vaults, until they got to this very tunnel, broke through one of the walls, and then peered in to see what was making the noise. So they looked in, very carefully. Ah! They ran screaming from what they saw, because ladies and gentlemen, what they saw behind that hole is so terrifying. I guarantee nothing you see tonight will be as scary as this. As it turns out, they had broken in to the sauna next door, more precisely to the steam room. And they had broken into a lovely couple's relaxing time together. So the moral of the story is that you will hear noises down here. Perhaps the groan of pipes, or perhaps the club next door. All of that can be explained. However, if as you stand here, you begin to hear a whisper behind you, and you know there's no one there, that is cause for alarm. So on that note, I think we've baited the watcher long enough. It's time to head into the safe room. This way. I got my last man?
Yeah.
Good. Well, ladies and gentlemen, before I say anything about this room, does anyone feel any differently in here? Any different sensations? Colder. I don't know if the rest of you feel it's colder.
Damper.
This is damper, yes. It's our coldest, dampest room, very simply. And it is not for any supernatural reasons, although cold spots can indicate energy being drawn from the room. As someone so lovely said, it is our dampest room. So you might hear dripping. It might feel colder. You might look up at the ceiling and see very small stalactites forming along the top of it. Now, when the room was dug out, these stalactites measured 1 to 2 meters long. So you can understand why the businesses who were here would have wanted to leave. Now, there was a business in this room. In here, we found leather, we found shoes, we found nails, all indicating a cobbler's workshop, and hence the name of the room, the Cobbler's Room. But it's a room that's not just named after what was found in here. This room is also named after what remains in here, because it's our second most active room, and we have in here the spirit of a cobbler. He resides in this corner. He's quite short, going grey, white shirt, leather apron, sometimes seen with a pair of shoes in his hands, and always seen with a smile on his face, because the cobbler is a very good and kind spirit, and he's the one that gives the room its other name, the safe room. Safe from the watcher, as this is the only room the watcher has never once been seen in, and we think it's the good spirit of the cobbler who is protecting the room. Again, or so we tell the daytime tours. You see, we haven't actually seen the cobbler in the last 3 years. Now, whether that makes his power to protect the room any less, we don't know. The Watcher has yet to be seen in here. But just because this room is safe from the Watcher does not mean it's safe from everything. And if the cobbler is keeping certain things out, he might be keeping certain things in. Because we have someone else in here. Someone in the other corner. And this time, it's not Pete. This time, it's a lady. See, she stands there, dressed in black, veil across her face. And as she stands there, she claws at her chest, tearing off large scraps of flesh, tearing at her stomach, watching the blood pool on the coffin at her feet. A coffin said to be no bigger than a very small child. The lady, you see, we don't know what happened to her. It could be a miscarriage, an abortion gone wrong. What we do know about her is this. She's a very upset and very powerful spirit, known to leap out of her corner and attack people across the room out of anger. But some of you will be happy to know that you're safe from the lady, because the lady only attacks women. Mostly women who are mothers or expecting mothers, but that doesn't rule the rest of you out. And the lady has an absolutely wonderful set of skills, because she attacks women who don't yet know they're pregnant. And so, in moments of very bad taste, we call her our MERCAT pregnancy test. And it's probably because I make that joke that she doesn't like me. Now, when I say she doesn't like me, I mean it, because I feel absolutely bound to tell you this. On the number of times the lady have been seen, it has been mostly on my tours. And apparently, she's no longer just seen in her corner, and no longer just seen in this room, but has taken to wandering through the rest of the vaults, following the tour groups too. I think calling this room the safe room is now no longer an option, and perhaps we should exit it as quickly as we can. But as we leave, I might advise the ladies on the tour to remain on this side of the archway, unless you particularly want to take our pregnancy test tonight. This way. Paige, you made it past the lady?
Yeah,
You're not pregnant, good sign. Well, ladies and gentlemen, quick word about this room. Now, for one, I have to point out the gate in the corner, because people often wonder. Very simply leads to the club next door. You'll hear the music coming from it. So in theory, nothing about to leap out from there, other than perhaps a very drunken, lost student, which is scary in its own way. However, I would advise upon going too close to that gate, because, and I am fully aware of what I'm about to say is going to sound ridiculous, but it is true. In the 20 years we've been running MERCAT tours, we have had no fewer than 4 cases of possession, and they have all happened in the vicinity of that gate. So if any of you start to act not quite yourselves, well, we'll know why. This is a room we call the wine vault, very simply because it's once used to store wine. Now, we need to remember this though. The wine would have been stored by the merchants who left in the 1820s and would have taken the wine with them, which means this room could have had a very different purpose in the years to come. You see, if it's a room good for storing wine, it's a room good for storing other things, like meat. And incidentally, like I said, these vaults run from the Royal Mile to right underneath the medical school. So very simply, if you're, say, a body snatcher who's carrying a body all the way from the graveyard to sell it to the medical school for £10, and you need a place to keep a body fresh overnight, well, this has a very handy storage system. So this room has gone from being a friendly wine vault to perhaps something a bit more sinister. And I think it's time that we head on. But as we do, please keep this in mind. There's a spirit I have yet to tell you about. This is a spirit who's a very friendly spirit, quite a young spirit, and who also wanders around the vaults and isn't just seen in one particular room. But because he wanders, this spirit knows what lies in each and every room, and he has been known to warn people against the next room. pulling on their clothes as if to hold them back. So if any of you feel a tug on your clothes as we move on, it is just Jack warning you of what lies ahead. But most unfortunately for you, you don't have a choice, because I have the only candle. This way. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you're standing in a room that we call the White Room, because very simply, if you are to look at the ceiling, you'll notice it's painted white. Not very imaginative, I'm afraid. Now, we don't quite know what this room is used for. We think it might have been a storeroom of some sort, but we've never found anything in here to prove that. What we do know about the room is this, though, and this we know with absolute certainty. It's our most active room, and it's the one most associated to the Watcher. And if you're observant, you might have noticed that I have led the way into every room. And I'm currently standing in the doorway of this one. You see, I don't come in here. The Watcher, like I said, isn't exactly friendly. We think he was a slum landlord, so in a way he owned the vaults, and we're now trespassing on his property. And this being his room, he's very upset about having people in here, which is why he appears most often in the White Room. Now, if you see him, he's quite a distinctive fellow. Quite short, dark hat on, blue scruffy coat, and a long, shiny pair of black leather boots, which has given rise to the nickname for him, Mr. Boots. A nickname which he hates because it makes him sound like a cartoon, but an accurate one nonetheless, as his footsteps are often heard echoing throughout the vaults. Those who see Mr. Boots aren't too worried about what he's wearing. It's his face that horrifies them. A white oval, 2 hollows for eyes, and a wide, gaping mouth, like he's screaming at them. And not only is he seen in and around the room, but it's also often seen behind the tour guide, and apparently in recent weeks has taken to blowing out the candle. Any of you do see Mr. Boots standing behind me, I'd ask that you please don't tell me, because I will realise he's there soon enough. People also come out of this room saying it was hotter or colder than other rooms, more oppressive. In here, they felt watched, or they felt a presence behind them. But most worryingly, they've come out of this room saying that they have been pushed, that some invisible force behind them has pushed them, leaving dark bruises on their body or deep scratch marks on their arms and chests, and there's no one around that could have done it. All of this is attributed to Mr. Boots. And you see, he's so very desperate for us to leave that he's even taken to attacking history tours. Now, on a history tour of the vaults, we don't tell people about the ghosts, but it doesn't mean that they're not here. There's actually been a bit of a recent incident. You see, not long ago, on a history tour, there was a lady standing at the back of this room, so I hope no one's there right now. As she stood there, listening to the tour guide, she began to feel a very cold touch on her neck and cheek. As she thought it was her friend breathing on her as a joke, as some of you might have done tonight. So she turned to look. But her friend was on the other side of the room. And then the cold touch moved to the other side of her cheek. And she thought it was a draft or a breeze of sorts, until the tour guide said, "These vaults are entirely sealed. No drafts, no breezes, no flickering candles, no cold spots." And that is when it moved again, and then began to go back and forth and gather a rhythm. And it's as it moved in front of her face, she felt a hot breeze wash across her. And she realised what she was feeling wasn't a draft or a breeze. It was a breath. And the breath continued back and forth. And as she went to reach out to the person in front of her and tap them on the shoulder to tell them what was going on, get out. A little voice came in her ear. As she thought it was her imagination running away with her, she ignored it. The voice, "Get out," came again, and then more insistent, "Get out." And that's when she turned to look to see if there was someone behind her. Now behind her, she could see a shiny pair of black leather boots. She could see above that a blue scruffy coat, and yet above that she could see Get out! Now you were all comparatively brave. This poor lady ran screaming from the vaults, very closely followed, I might add, by the tour guide, and obviously then the rest of the group. So it is safe to say at this point that we are not wanted in the vaults. It's time for us to leave them. Those have no choice but to remain. But as you exit the vaults, I'd ask that you remember this, because ladies and gentlemen, our tour has come to its end. You see, as you leave tonight, well, you're leaving the vaults and everything you leave behind, all the stories, all the spirits. But everywhere in Edinburgh has a history. Some of it you might know, some of it you might not, some of it you might not even want to know. So if you go home tonight and you lie in bed and hear the creak of the door and the footsteps, or feel a cold touch on your neck and cheek, please just remember that everywhere in Edinburgh can be haunted. On that note, I wish you a very good night and a very pleasant Halloween. It's time for us to leave this way.